Those songs I don't think will ever go away.
Oh, I hope not. If Fleetwood Mac has 0 fans, I'm dead.
Welcome to the Siren Songbook, a podcast where we discuss female artists, their music, their history, and the impact they've made on the music industry. Join us each month as we pick a new inspirational artist and celebrate exactly what it is that makes them so magical. Welcome, everyone, to the first episode of the Siren Songbook. I am Amy.
I'm Casey.
And today we are going to be talking about Fleetwood Mac because I feel like, obviously, that's where we should start. Two amazing women in the band, especially in a time when, like, women were just becoming people.
Yeah, I mean, literally, like, Stevie Nicks joined the band around the time that women were finally given the opportunity to open their own credit card without their husband's permission. So, and that's only been 50 years. My gosh.
That's so crazy to think about. So, yeah, I figured that would be a great place to start. First of all, it's Stevie Nicks and Christine McVie. And then also because they fronted this amazing band that is one of the best-selling bands of all time.
Yeah.
So that is where we're going to start. We're going to start with some history and then dive into their albums and their music and wherever else things may take us along the road.
Yeah.
So do you want to start?
Sure. What's cool is Fleetwood Mac was a band that was big in England specifically around the late 60s. And initially they were a 5-piece band. And some people call it a revolving door of bandmates where they just had different people coming in and out. In the early 70s, like 1970, John McVie started dating this woman named Christine. And when their guitar player left, they were like, hey, do you want to come in and be a part of this? And she was like, oh, I guess, maybe. And Christine in her own right was already a well-known and well-established musician, so she joined on keys. But then going into the 1970s, they decided they wanted to make a change and move to Los Angeles to maybe become a little bit more popular in the United States. Around the same time, Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham moved down from San Francisco, and, you know, she's working day and night trying to make ends meet. You know, Lindsey's at home playing his guitar and working on these recordings for what would later be known as Buckingham Nicks. That came out in 1973, and it was originally released to critical acclaim on Polydor Records, but shortly after it released, it was not a commercial success, so they dropped them. And in that meantime, Stevie Nicks is a waitress, and she's also a cleaning lady, and she's keeping the house in order. But when Mick Fleetwood is trying to find another guitar player, he hears these demos from Buckingham Nicks and is like, who is this guitar player? I need him. I need to talk to him. And he reaches out and is like, hey, I'm interested in joining the band. And Lindsey was kind of on the fence about it. And he was also like, well, me and my girl are kind of a package deal. And Stevie's the one that ends up going, we need to do this. But primarily because she's been the breadwinner of the family for a couple of years now. And at this point, she's 27, 28 years old. And she's like, I'm sick and tired of waitressing, and I'm sick and tired of cleaning. And I want to not have to do this anymore. I want to be able to do the thing that I love. And shortly after, they joined Fleetwood Mac. And that is the start of our story, I think.
And that's a little rundown for those of you who aren't obsessed with Fleetwood Mac, like us.
Normal people.
It's so insane to me, too, to think about Stevie Nicks being a waitress and supporting Lindsey, who is amazing in his own right, even though he's a piece of shit. He, has his own contributions to everything. But the fact that it's fucking Stevie Nicks, right, and she's the one who's supporting his music career as he goes out, and she's at home working to pay for their place,
right?
And, like,
I think in her own words, she said that, like, she didn't have a problem being the one to, like, go out and make the money, and, like, she was the one paying the rent and paying for their car that they shared together, mainly because, like, she was like, it's Lindsey Buckingham. There's no way he could have held down a job. Like, he's so, he's such the musician guy. And I think in like her masterclass that she did with Oprah Winfrey, she talks about that just a little bit. Like there's no way he could have been able to do that. So she was fine with working, you know, all day and then coming home from her shifts as a waitress and working on their EP in the basement of their little place in Los Angeles, and then till like 2 or 3 in the morning, and then getting back up and doing it all over again. But it definitely weared on her for sure. Like,
yeah,
as would it for anybody, for anyone.
It's also insane to me, like you said. So like Christine was already a fairly well-known musician, but like she was part of the band for a few years before the 1970s change, where she was like a keyboardist in the studio and stuff. And I'm like, what took you so long to bring her in? Especially because she's such an amazing songwriter. And I don't know if that was her choice, or like if when they asked, they were like, do you want to be a part of it? And she was like, maybe.
I think she was probably, and you know, I can't speak for her in any capacity, but like I think she was probably wary about it. I know she said in interviews after her and John McVie broke up that they probably would have still been together had she not joined Fleetwood Mac. So she kind of understood the implications of that, of like, I'm in a creative and also already successful band with my partner, and that's going to cause significant tension. Not to mention the fact that, like, you know, John McVie wasn't the nicest person. He was an alcoholic struggling with that sort of stuff prior to them also then introducing like drugs into the equation. And it just becoming this huge sort of situation. But like, yeah, it is really interesting. I mean, I understand wanting to like separate your business from your romantic partner. But I mean, what a welcome addition. And I know that like once, you know, it was kind of understood that they'd only get Lindsey Buckingham if Stevie Nicks was allowed to join too. They left the sole veto to Christine about like, well, okay, so they were going to bring in another woman, and obviously it's really important that these two women get together. So Christine, if you don't like her, then we just won't go with either of them. And
I know they said they were like nervous about drama and stuff, which is so hilarious to me because Fleetwood Mac is drama.
Is the drama, regardless of the person. And I don't think it ever was between Stevie and Christine, which is hilarious. But I guess right away, you know, Stevie said that it was like magic. They met each other and were like, oh, that's my sister. Like, that's my gal.
There's actual interviews where they were like, oh, is it hard working with another woman? Because, you know, the industry and people like to do that. And she was like, no, it's like having a sister on the road with me.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they had their sisterly fights just like all siblings do.
Yeah.
But they were like, no, we're here for each other. And they even made a pact where I can't remember the exact quote, but they were basically like, no, we're a team. And when we go into these rooms with powerful men in the music industry, we're not going to let them look down on us because we're women. And they supported each other. And yeah, it was like a power couple, basically. Like,
dude, yes. Everything that them with their romantic relationships didn't have.
Yes.
For sure. But it's great that they had each other to navigate this highly misogynistic entertainment sphere. It still is today, but could you imagine 50 years ago what it was like where it's like, oh,
well, like you said, they just got the right to like own their own credit card.
Right.
And so, you know, yes, there were female musicians and stuff, but they were not looked at in the same way, treated in the same way. They were expected to do way more than their male counterparts to be successful. And they went into this world, they had each other, and they were like, no, we don't hate each other. We're not in competition. We're not going against each other. We're actually supporting each other. And even in the songwriting, there was somebody that said that Christine started writing more when Stevie and Lindsey entered the band because she was like, oh, I can do this too. And the inspiration of having other writers, and particularly Stevie, encouraged her. And we got some of the best written songs
of all time
from Christine.
Exactly.
To think that was because, and I can vouch for that because I love writing with like you and Janelle and other female writers, because there's something about that creative space with you guys that just
there's like a tender perspective on life that's hard to find, and not in like women understand things better than men sort of way. It's just, you know, we talked about this before, but like Christine's songwriting is so tender and so optimistic. It has such a nurturing and feminine quality about it. Only having that like space for femininity could that nourish and be brought out of somebody.
And not just that, but it's a lot of men, when they get in a room, they're like, oh, I'm the best.
Yeah.
Let me show you how I'm the best at this. Where when women get together to collaborate, and again, not saying all men or all women, but when women get in a room to collaborate and it is a nurturing feminine energy of support, it's not I'm the best, let me show you how it's done.
It's a
Let's
community
share
event.
ideas.
Yeah, it's not, well, I have to get this line in because I need more songwriting credit. And again, that's not the case for all people all the time in every situation. It's just, I guess, historically and our own personal instances and situations of dealing with that in our own lives that we can pull from.
No, and I just always loved that there was never this, even though everybody expected it when they were like, oh, there's 2 women in the band, it's going to be drama. The drama never came from that.
No.
Which I guess could lead us into their albums. So they started with Fleetwood Mac.
Yes.
And I don't know why I paused on that. They started with Fleetwood Mac. And as I was going through these albums, I was writing down how many songs the women sang compared to how many songs Lindsay sang. And not in a way of hating on it or anything, but you had Stevie Nicks and Christine McVie, and he still sang the majority of the songs.
Don't get me wrong, great singer.
Yeah.
Great singer. I will say it is, yeah, that's a very interesting thing to look at, how like there's still that primary perspective coming from his part.
Yeah.
Which I think really shaped the way that the band was perceived at that time period.
Well, and then like also as I'm going through them, you look at the songs that were hits, and they're mostly the songs that were sang by the women.
Very true.
And there's songs like The Chain, which I call that more of a group song.
Yeah.
Go Your Own Way was obviously a hit, and that one wasn't. But most of the songs that were hits were sung by Stevie or Christine.
I think the ones that had the most lasting impact, the ones that are still popular 50 years later, have that feminine perspective to them. And again, yes, The Chain and Go Your Own Way are 2 very, very, very popular songs. They're still very popular to this day. But Dreams had a renaissance because the situation that Stevie went through in that moment is something that women are still going through today. I always will, because it's just, it's loving someone and being heartbroken by that person.
So they came out with Fleetwood Mac, and I listened to that. And then, of course, the infamous Rumors comes out. And Rumors not only is a great album and one of the best-selling albums of all time, but it's not just the music, it's the drama that came along with it. Because they all went through this group breakup with everyone they loved.
Yeah.
You know, Stevie and Lindsay, Christine and John, and then Mick Fleetwood was divorcing his wife, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And so all of that was supercharged into Rumors and the music being made and the songs that were being recorded. But people were also drawn into the album because they wanted to hear the drama.
Oh, yeah. Of course. That piping hot tea.
All their music was what they were going through in the studio. I loved Go Your Own Way for a long time until I knew the story behind it. And then I was like...
Yeah. I feel like it's still, the thing is, regardless of, I know that people always talk about separating the art from the artist, it's still a fantastic song.
Yeah.
I think knowing that the acting up, shacking up is all you want to do line was something that Stevie really hated, it makes me feel kind of sad. I know that, so just to give a little backstory on that time period of Rumors, they headed into the studio to make it in 1976. And at this point, you know, they started spending, you know, significant amounts of money on cocaine, which I will say that has its own effect on relationships and that sort of thing. But Stevie and Lindsay had a tumultuous relationship, not from the start, but for a very long time. I think they really weren't getting along when they were really struggling financially prior to joining Fleetwood Mac. But, you know, she wanted to stay together with him because she was like, no, the music is more important. And then they got to a place when, you know, they both realized, okay, we're not going to leave this band if we break up. But Stevie was so heartbroken over how the relationship was going, how he was making her so miserable, that she started looking elsewhere for love and affection, because there was no love and affection in that relationship anymore. And I'm not saying that like I condone infidelity in any way, or I do or I don't in any sort of fashion, but it kind of just got to a point where it was just very obvious that it was done. It was done romantically speaking, and it wasn't going to derail what they had already had. And her wanting to stick with him for the sake of the music was not necessary anymore for them to be able to live their dreams. And I couldn't imagine how uncomfortable it is to break up with someone and the next day in the breakfast room at the hotel, you have to like see them. And then on stage the night after, you have to like pretend like you guys are still totally in love.
Or like even go record. But you've been through a situation like that because you stayed in your band.
Yeah.
And that's actually, you sent me Silver Springs right after that because you related to it so well, which, speaking of rumors, total travesty that it wasn't on the
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was a B-side.
Go Your Own Way.
And that's just, it's so sad. But so I have my own on and off again relationship with one of my band members. And yeah, when we like broke up for real back in 2021, I really leaned on my female friends, and I'm really glad that they were there for me because I don't think I could have gotten through that without it. But yeah, it's breaking up with somebody and then having to see them the next day at rehearsal. And I know people can sit there and say, what's the point? You guys could just start a new band. And in my head, I think to myself, it's not worth it because the music, blah, 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 blah. And Silver Springs, oh my God, was the thing that got me through it. I know that she said that she knew that it was truly over when they were on a drive in Maryland and she passes this sign that says Silver Springs, like Maryland. And she was like, Silver Springs, that's such a beautiful name. That must be such a beautiful place. And so she was thinking about the concept of what Silver Springs could be in her own head and how Lindsay didn't fit that anymore because he was so mean. Yeah. And they were not getting along. So the opening line of like, you could be my Silver Springs. Like you could have been all these things, but you're like this. And so in that line in like the bridge where she's like, you'll never get away from the sound of the woman that loved you, is so, it's not just haunting for its own way. And I know the people on TikTok will be like, she was hexing him. Regardless of that, it's just a heartbroken woman who has to work very intimately with the love of her life.
Yes.
Who maybe in a different scenario, maybe if they weren't in Fleetwood Mac, they would be married, they'd have kids, they'd do whatever, but their calling was to be in this thing. And the sacrifice of being in this thing was their relationship.
And I do love to say, oh, look, she's putting a curse on him, especially in the dance. That specific performance where she's just staring him down.
Oh, yes.
And it's one of my favorite moments ever.
If you're even remotely into Fleetwood Mac, you have seen this live performance from the album's called The Dance, but it's 1994, and they finally get to play it 20 years after her and Lindsay break up, and she is just looking at him, locking eyes, and just everything that she's ever wanted to say to him. It's almost like she's saying it with just her eyes, and he's realizing it as they're talking, and
they're communicating through the music, and it's just so, it's hypnite.
You can't look away.
It's my Roman Empire. I think about it every day.
Dude, yes. I watch that video, I would say, honestly, like at least once a week, but there are certain times of the year where I'm watching it like every day. It is such a travesty that it wasn't on the original lineup of Rumors. And I know the main reason for that is because at the time, when they were putting the whole album together, they'd already recorded it. And then like Mick Fleetwood, I think like, well, there's too many ballads, so this one doesn't have any place on there. That was something that affected her so deeply. She considered breaking up with the band.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want to put Silver Springs on there. And I get it. Like even more so than Dreams is just such a heartbreaking truth about leaving the love of your life. That like tenderly brokenness is only like when you get Lindsay's perspective and Go Your Own Way and The Chain and that sort of thing, there's just this anger and this, I don't know. There's just this anger there that she has this, no, this is heartbreak and I wanted you to be my end game. You know? And he's like, well, you're just a slut.
Well, and that's what's so magical about Silver Springs too, and why so many people all these years later are like, why was that not on Rumors? And even when they did the, not revival, the remastering, they added Silver Springs to the album because so many people were like, that should have been on the album.
Dude, I mean, what's so interesting about Silver Springs is the fact that after they did that live performance, it became so popular that in the next year, 1995, it was nominated for Best Pop Duo Performance. So it had an effect on people 20 years after it was recorded, and therefore only after, you know, it was shown that, oh, people actually really like this, they added it to the 2004 remaster of Rumors. But to this day, it's one of the most popular songs on their Spotify. People listen to it incessantly. There's so many people, like new fans my age, fans younger than me. Their favorite song is also Silver Springs.
Mm-hmm. There's Reddit threads of people like, I don't understand.
Just dissecting how, like, how could this not be? And of course, you know, you can't see the forest for the trees when you're in it.
Yes.
And I'm sure Mick Fleetwood's sitting here now like, oh, I guess we should have put that on the record. But what a beautiful song that it's written almost 50 years later. And me in my, you know, own personal life can sit there and say, I can't find a single other breakup song that truly breaks down exactly how I'm feeling in this moment. It's just this.
Well, and what's so magical about it is it's so specific in the way that when she wrote it, it was very specific to their relationship. Like, you'll never get away from the sound of the woman that loves you. Silver Springs, nobody, unless you know the history of the song, nobody knows what that means, but just through her voice, you feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's a very specific song to them, and everybody still relates to it and loves it. Dude, because that's the magic of Stevie.
Oh, of course. If we want to like backtrack just a little with their first album with the two new members, Fleetwood Mac specifically, it's the same thing with Landslide. She wrote that song very specifically about her own life, about, you know, she hopped on that leg of the tour, be with Lindsay while he's playing with the Everly Brothers. They're in Aspen. She's just in the hotel room looking at her life. She's 27 years old. And she thought her life was going to be different. She was like, I thought we were going to make it. I thought that Buckingham Nicks was going to be the start of my life as a musician. And here I am working, waitressing, cleaning houses, and Lindsay's playing guitar. And she wrote that song very specifically about their relationship. And that 50 years later it's still one of their biggest songs of all time. And I mean, that's another song that has I've heard it throughout my entire life before I even really conceptualized what Fleetwood Mac was, because my parents weren't necessarily into them. So I didn't grow up listening to them until I discovered them when I was older. But throughout my whole life, I've always heard Landslide, whether it be like the Dixie Chicks version or the Smashing Pumpkins version or whatever. And then recently, I'm at the same stage of my life, where I'm thinking my life is going to turn out one way. I'm 27, almost 28 at this time, and feeling like, wow, I really thought things were going to be different. And I've spent so much time with this particular person, I don't know what adult me is like outside of them. And so the opening line of that chorus of, I've been afraid of changing because I've built my life around you. Wow. What a
hits
line.
So hard.
It hits so hard. I think like anybody could sit there and say like, oh, I've had a great love of my life in my transition into adulthood. And whether or not it's lasted the test of time, maybe it's expired, it doesn't matter. But everyone goes through a long-term relationship that fundamentally changes them, that they don't recognize themselves at the end of it. And like, of course, you know, her and Lindsay were not at a good place then. And this is prior to them joining Fleetwood Mac. And she's like, I can't leave because I've put everything into my life with you. And that's just so powerful and so crazy.
And then even years later, she's like said, this song is about my father too, or whatever.
Yeah.
And so like, there's also not just the relationship of a great love, but also like the relationship of family and stuff that can be read through that song too. And a song that can transform like that to fit so many experiences, but be written so specifically about a specific relationship or moment or whatever, is incredible to me. The writing is so masterful for it to be able
100%. It really takes somebody that has a deep sense of understanding of themselves and the world around them to write a song that lasts the test of time. There's few like it, like Yesterday from the Beatles, Paul McCartney wrote, or even a perfect example in my opinion is Both Sides Now from Joni Mitchell, and how she was much younger then, in her early to mid 20s, and had this zest for life and this, the whole world's in front of me, I wonder what's going to happen. And she did that re-record in the early 2000s that was made popular by Love Actually, and you can hear the age in her voice through, you know, the smoking, whatever, but her voice is down. She sings an entire octave lower. And like, I've looked at life from both sides now as somebody, you know, 30 years older than she was when she first released that song, and just the perspective you just hear in her voice.
Yeah.
That you can listen to that song as a kid and it's like, I've looked at life from both sides now. Ha 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 ha. And then you listen to it again later in life and you're like, oh my God. Few people have the understanding of life to like really be able to write a song that just lasts like that. And that's why Silver Springs has that magnitude 50 years later. That's why Landslide has that magnitude 50 years later. You could only dream of potentially writing a song like that could last far longer than you.
And then on the flip side, you also have almost complete opposite of Lindsay and Stevie, who are just writing about this massive heartbreak and drama. You have Christine McVie and John McVie, who remained friends.
Yeah.
Even though she fell in love with their, you said lighting director?
Yeah.
Fell in love with their lighting director, wrote a song about it.
Oh my gosh. And she wrote, "You Make Love and Fun." And not about John, about the lighting director. But I think that's so interesting that their breakups were so vastly different, but encompassed all sides of what a relationship and what the ending of a relationship can look like. Because there are people that, can break up and sit there and go, all right, well, thank you very much. That was a lot of fun. And I learned a lot from you and I'm going to move on. And then you have people that are like, I want you to just die after a relationship ends. And I think that's such a testament to the different perspectives that both Stevie and Christine have, almost like a yin and yang of Stevie bearing her soul, talking about how deeply sad the relationship is ending. And then Christine McVie's over here like, woohoo, I found somebody else in there. So cool. And also I'm still friends with my, my ex-husband.
Well, and even Songbird is one of my favorite songs too. I love Songbird so much. And Christine's voice on it is just, love it.
So good.
But thinking through those lyrics, I didn't look up the history of this before the podcast, forewarning. But just now sitting here thinking, I'm like, were they written about someone else? Or were they written about she loves him still, just not like before?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I guess I don't necessarily know the history of that particular song either, but I do think it's just so wonderful that even in those moments, even though they are personally breaking up, she has that just light perspective.
Yes, we talked about it earlier in the podcast. Like, she has an optimism to her writing and her songs.
Yeah,
that is
one that's needed.
Yes,
on Rumors definitely, but like in general, it's just so magical to love the way that Christine loves. What a beautiful place to be. I mean, I think she really, 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 I think her peak moment in that band of like her coming forward and this being like her spotlight is in Tango of the Night.
Yeah.
Oh, one of the most popular songs of all time, Everywhere. I want to be with you everywhere. I want to do everything with you. I want to go to the store. I just want to sit at home. I want to go out and go crazy. Like, I just want to be with you everywhere. And everyone can see it. And I feel these butterflies in all these places to just love like Christine loves. Oh,
yes.
That's the goal.
And it's, you said, very much needed in between Lindsay, who's just
going his own way.
Yeah.
Hey.
and then Stevie, who's completely brokenhearted.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's also safe to say to love the way that Stevie loved Lindsay, I think, is also such a blessing too, to love that way. So hearing both perspectives of truly loving a person and then having to let them go for whatever reason. Yeah, it can be extremely heartbreaking, but you can, for the initial like first couple weeks of the heartbreak, you blast Stevie. And then for the reflective part of the heartbreak where you're like, okay, I think I can pick myself back up, then you blast Christine. Just to round it out.
And you get it all on one album.
Right. And if you go through the angry part of the grieving stage, that's when you blast Lindsay's music. It really goes through everything. I love that. I think it's so powerful and palpable, and
which is why Rumors is one of the best selling albums of all time.
Mm-hmm. To this day, I put it on. I'm like, oh yeah. If it came out today, I'd be like, oh my God, this is fucking amazing.
Yes.
Obviously, the 1977 version should have included Silver Springs.
Well, and that's another thing. I don't want to buy the new version of Rumors with Silver Springs on it. I want to find the actual release with the B-side and have that in my collection, which is going to be
expensive.
A mission and expensive, but I want it.
Discogs might have it. You might be able to find it.
And Leo has a search out for it on Discogs.
Oh, hell yeah.
We're keeping an eye out for it. And one day it will be mine, and then I can die happy.
There you go. Hell yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. The aftermath of Rumors, it just skyrocketed them into this like stratosphere of superstardom.
Yes.
They were everywhere. I mean, Dreams was their very first #1 single, and that's including the time before Stevie and Lindsay joined the band. I mean, and Dreams had its moment again in 2020. To this day, I think, let me just look up.
It was trending on TikTok and Instagram for a while, I know.
Yeah.
Because there was that one guy who did that skating video where he just had it playing and he's just rolling down the street.
Which is the way to listen to that song, I swear. Yeah, Dreams is the #1 stream song on their Spotify profile with 1.4 billion streams, almost 1.5 billion. The Chain being right underneath, everywhere from Tango the Night. And then the next 2 songs are also Go Your Own Ways right after that, and then Landslide. So that just like goes to show just what's popular. But Dreams has had its moment. It will continue to have its moment. It'll come back in another couple years.
Yes.
It'll never die because it's such a beautiful song. Oh, players only love you when they're playing. Ow! But that's her like woman scorned song.
Yeah.
And I think it sounds so good. And what I find so magical about that song, and I've touched on this before, if anybody ever finds me in public and wants to talk about Fleetwood Mac, let's do it. Have you got 2 hours? But what I find really interesting is that Stevie Nicks has said there are a couple times in her life where there are songs that have basically written themselves. And prior to Dreams, Landslide was that first one where it took her 10 minutes, honestly, to get all of that out on the page. And for that to be such an important song all these years later is just so magical and such a test to the songwriting quality that Stevie Nicks actually has, the musicianship quality that she has.
Yeah.
That same thing happened again, lightning struck twice with Dreams. They're, at the studio, they're recording their songs. This just happens to be a day where she's not needed in the studio. And so she wanders in to the studio next door, which is like Sly and the Family Stone studio. And it's this like sunken in studio where there's, a Fender Rhodes piano and a bunch of crushed velvet curtains around. And she just brings her little like track recorder and plays 3 little notes and writes Dreams in 10 minutes. And even though her and Lindsay are no longer on good terms because they've just broken up, she plays it for him. And, what I really admire about him is that regardless of their fucking history and their bullshit, he can hear a song and go, that's a hit. That's good.
That's a good song.
And at first, Christine didn't really like it. She was like, it's like 3 notes in one hand and 1 note in the other. There's nothing interesting about this. And Lindsay heard that and went, okay, hold on a second, and came up with this beautiful guitar melody, these melodies that kind of like flew into each other that convinced everybody else that it was a song worth recording. And that 10-minute song is their biggest song of all time.
Yeah.
I just think that's so like, people only dream of having that moment of like, oh, that's our next hit and that song was written in 10 minutes. But usually the best songs always are. She didn't sit there and intricately think of every line like I do as a songwriter. I'm like, well, is this good? I don't know. She just
tearing apart every single line that you write, and then you're like, is this good enough? Do I have enough flowy words in this? No, it was just
she's just being honest with herself. She's just opening her heart up to like what came out, and what came out was fucking Dreams. We could only wish that would happen to us.
Well, and there's such a lesson in honest songwriting.
Oh yeah.
They don't hide anything in their songwriting. They don't shy away from anything. They don't cover it up with flowery words. They're just like, this is what I'm feeling. And yeah, some people might be like, oh, well, Stevie's words are flowery, but that's because that's who she is.
She's a flowery person.
Yeah,
Have you watched an interview? But I think the album, so in between that time of Rumors and their next album, Tusk, I've heard them talk about how their drug use, their cocaine use specifically, just like hit like a maximum and everybody's just kind of at their wit's end. And I think, it's at that point there was like lines blurred between Stevie and Mick Fleetwood and all this other stuff. Then there was like this will they won't they of Stevie and Lindsay maybe trying to work things out but also not working things out, and that really like leads into their follow-up to Rumors, which is Tusk. And for the longest time, I think Tusk itself was one of my favorite songs. I think it has such an interesting drum part, and I know that one that's a Lindsay song. But there's another song on that album that's always been really interesting to me. It's called Sarah. And
I have Sarah written down on my list too.
Dude, Sarah is such an interesting song, and I spent a lot more time listening to it. And I think it has such a it sounds like it could have been on Rumors. honestly. And I did a little research into it because I was like, it's such an interesting song. And I wasn't sure necessarily what it was about. It actually started out as a poem and that she ended up putting music and lyrics to. But it was partially written for her best friend, or for one of her friends, Sarah, who ended up marrying Mick Fleetwood after their on and off affair. But from what I heard about that, Mick Fleetwood said in his own 2014 biography that he thinks it was a lot about the fact that his affair with Stevie Nicks was not exclusive. So then he started dating Sarah as well, or having an affair technically with Sarah while having an affair with Stevie. And it really upset Stevie because as soon as she found out, she cut off their fling. She was like, oh, this is over. And like she said, yeah, that could potentially have something to do with it. But I also think what's really interesting is that Stevie's ex at the time, or well, ex after that time period, Don Henley of the Eagles, said that Sarah was a name that she said that, you know, she ever had a child and it was a girl, that's what she would name her child. And so I guess at that time, she had gotten pregnant with Don Henley's child and decided not to have that kid because her career was more important to her, which is very valid, and women should be allowed to make that choice for themselves. Yes. And very thankful that she was allowed to make that choice in that time. But he went off and obviously told her fucking business to the rest of the world, but said, oh, Sarah's about her unborn kid. And she said in a later interview, I think it was like 2009 or something like that. It's much, much later. She was like, I guess that could be a part of it, maybe. But at the same time, that's her business to tell. Yeah. For sure. But listening to those lyrics and stuff, there is like an achy quality about it. And if I'm like going to make my own assumptions here, I think maybe the Mick Fleetwood version of starting to date somebody else while they're in their own tumultuous affair, like that's... seems kind of par for the course, while also mourning something that might not be there.
But I also love that all these men are coming in and trying to explain what her song was about.
They're trying to mansplain and center themselves. That was the whole point I wanted to make, which was, oh, all of these men are saying that it's about this. She didn't say that. And even if it's true, it's none of your fucking business.
And because it's a great song, they're like, I want to be a part of this somehow.
Right.
Well, okay, I might be putting that on them. But I feel like that's why.
It's interesting.
Like, I mean, it's such a good song, and it's not one of their most popular. It's not a song that a lot of people know. I had heard it before, but I didn't really hear it until I was listening through the albums for this podcast. Mm-hmm. And I was like, ooh, I really like this one. Mm-hmm. And like you said, there is a essence of sorrow in it. And I did wonder what Sarah was about. I assumed just from listening to the lyrics that it was about some sort of affair or something. Yeah. But
well, you know, the only person that knows is Stevie Nicks. And if she wants to disclose what it's about, that's totally for her to say. I just, again, like you said, it's very funny that these other men are like, well, I think it's about this.
And what does it matter? Because again, like a lot of Stevie's songs, a lot of different people find different meaning in it.
And it could be about literally everything everyone's mentioned or none of it at all. But at the end of the day, yeah, it definitely started as a poem, and it's just such an interesting track.
Also, we were talking earlier about how much love Stevie has in her heart. Mm-hmm. You said for to even experience that kind of love. In my opinion, Lindsay is a piece of shit. I do not like him, but she still cares about him to this day. I just read that even after him being fired from the band, he had a stroke. Was it a stroke, I think, or a heart attack? Ooh. Something. She called him while he was in the hospital and checked in on him. Hey, she still loves him. Yeah. She still cares about him. I get that they had a connection. They made this kind of music together. You see it on stage even before she plays Landslide. A lot of times she'll like thank Lindsay, and when they play it together, it's usually just the two of them. And
yeah, it's such a tender moment in the show, and yes, I know it means a lot. I think the first time they met was, you know, she was a senior in high school, and it was just this party that was going on, and he's in the corner of the room playing California Dreamin' from the Mamas and the Papas, and she doesn't even like introduce herself. She just jumps into song with him. From the moment they met, they were in harmony with each other. But that harmony didn't come without its share of a lot of work. Yeah. And they've always been a part of each other's musical lives, because he was in a different band called The Fritz, and they wanted a female singer, and he remembered her from that party. So the drummer of that band calls her up and is like, hey, do you want to join this band? And she's like, what kind of band? And the drummer goes, Stevie, it's San Francisco. It's a rock band. And so they get to experience the magic of like the Summer of Love and that whole Woodstock group of people. Like that band opened for Jefferson Airplane. They got to open for all these people and they got to enjoy all that time together. And then in the midst of them working on their album and writing more music, they fell in love and they made the leap together, regardless of their financial situation, to move to Los Angeles and start their lives together. So everything that either of them has is because of the other person.
Yes.
That they would not have anything without the other. And that's such a magical bond, while tumultuous and while full of rampant issues on their own. There will always be a tenderness in each other's hearts for the other person.
And we were just making it to like the Tusk era. That album, you can hear the controversy through the whole album. It's a very strange album, but I do love Tusk. But Lindsey was wanting to go his own way with wanting to be more punk kind of, and recording in the bathroom and
just experimenting.
Yeah, he wanted to be very experimental. And you can tell the difference between what the girls were writing and what he was writing. And
it's not the most sonically cohesive album, I'd say. Yeah.
No. There's some great stuff on it, but most of the stuff I wrote down were the girls. But that's just my personal taste.
Yeah, exactly.
But Tusk is a great song.
Yeah.
I love Tusk. But then they went on tour for that, and things got really bad during that tour. And that's the tour where he like kicked Stevie on stage and all that stuff. And then she went solo.
Yeah. She had her own solo album. Belladonna was a beautiful record. And then there's some magical songs that came out of that time period of writing that ended up making it onto their next album, Mirage. But Stevie Nicks, which I think is so interesting, is not just Fleetwood Mac. Her singularity was enough to make her a superstar in her own right outside of it. And I believe she's the first female to be inducted twice into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. First as Fleetwood Mac, and then for her solo work, which happened a couple of years ago. And Edge of 17, just such an iconic, just the opening riff of the da-da-da-da-da-da. You already know what song's playing. Which is crazy.
Just like the wild-winged dove sings a song. It's just fucking great.
It's so good.
And that's, I have this written down that Lindsey also tried to start his own solo career because he wanted to experiment and stuff, and it didn't take off.
It didn't take off in the same way, definitely.
Yeah.
I know that like throughout the years, like he's released his own solo stuff, and then Christine released her own solo stuff, and then him and Christine wrote an album together, and like this and that, and I think that that's interesting. But the one with the most singular superstardom was Stevie, and that's because of her magnetism and her songwriting ability. And she was never just Lindsey's girlfriend or whatever. She is her own superstar that, you know, I think is really interesting. And in that time period of writing Belladonna, she starts writing another song called Gypsy, which I think is a really interesting song. I mean, yes, we don't use that word anymore, and so it's hard to talk about it 100% without acknowledging the fact that that is not a word we use
say anymore.
If you're going to use that word, use Roma. But the earliest version of that song was written in 1979 and was possibly going to be included on her solo album, but it was written for the nostalgia of her life before Fleetwood Mac, which I think is really interesting. The first verse alludes to her life with Lindsey when they couldn't afford a bed frame at one point because they were so broke. But at the time, she made the most of what they had, and she had this beautiful vintage lace detailing comforter, and then off to the side of the room on the corner there's like a lamp, and she had this vase full of paper flowers, which really goes into the actual lyrics of the song, because I remember the first time I heard it I was like, what are you talking about? And so the very first line, "So I'm back to the Velvet Underground," is the Velvet Underground is this vintage shop that had the most interesting and intricate clothing. That was this underground place in San Francisco that she used to shop at a lot for her clothing. Back to the floor that I love, to a room with some lace and some paper flowers, which is, you know, this little tiny home that she made with just her and Lindsey before all this expectation of Fleetwood Mac. And I think what's really interesting is that when she talked about this often, when she's really feeling overwhelmed to this day, she'll grab her mattress and go put it on the floor somewhere, and it'll just be a room with her mattress and like a lamp and some paper flowers, and that she'll go back to that place when she's really overwhelmed. And I think that's really interesting because, you know, talking about how they didn't join Fleetwood Mac, they probably would have got married and had a life together that was much different than the life that they ended up having. And she says in her masterclass with Oprah that life may have taken them, or destiny might have taken them in a different direction had they not joined Fleetwood Mac. But this is the direction that it took. And I don't think that she would trade a second of her life that she currently has for something else. But just being nostalgic for that safety in that time with him, and then also by herself, because her life doesn't revolve around Lindsey Buckingham, of course.
Yes.
But the very first time I heard Gypsy, I was like, well, I don't really know what you're talking about with the Velvet Underground. I knew that was a band, but I didn't know that was like literally she's just talking about, I just want to go back to the way things used to be when before I had all this fame, before I had all this money, I was happier.
Yes.
Which is so interesting. I just really appreciate that song because
I was thinking of another song. I for some reason thought it was Gypsy, but I just went back and looked and it was Crystal. She re-recorded that when she went solo because it was originally sang by Lindsey.
Interesting.
On the album. And I was like, that makes sense. Also, I believe, were you the one to tell me that Silver Springs was when she wanted to take solo? Or did I hear that on a documentary?
It might have been a documentary. I didn't actually know that.
She wanted to play that one solo.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, she wanted to put it on her solo album.
Right, and then the people of Fleetwood Mac were like, no, you can't. Which is crazy. She just wanted that song to be out because she knew how magical it was and how therapeutic it was for her. And they stifled it for 20 years.
But you know what? It came back. She made a comeback with a vengeance.
Oh, yeah. If the song is meant to be heard, it will be heard. Maybe not in the time frame that makes the most sense, but, we all can enjoy it now and be swept up in the magic of Stevie Nicks.
Speaking of that, we're just going to jump into what would you say your favorite album of theirs is?
It changes often. I think when I first found Fleetwood Mac, my favorite album was Fleetwood Mac, mainly because I love Rhiannon. Oh my gosh, the first time I heard Rhiannon, I was like, what is this?
So good.
And I was like, oh yeah, I know Landslide, whatever. Like, that's such a good song. I've just heard it my whole life. And it didn't have any meaning to me in the way that it does currently in an autobiographical sense. So I guess maybe I'm a bandwagon hopper in any sort of capacity. But like, as an avid fan of Fleetwood Mac, who's heard all of their records, I always will go back to Rumors. I just think it just hits.
There's a reason it's the best selling.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. What about you?
I would say I love Rumors, of course. My favorite were some of the live albums, though. Like, I love The Dance so hard. And I always watch it as a live concert. Like, I watch the video with it. And same with their live album. Like, they're just playing live album where it's live performances from...
Oh, the Live from Boston? Or
there's a Live from Boston. I watched that one, but they also have an out there. It's called Live. And it's a whole bunch of different places.
Right. Yeah.
And I always love those because you get a little bit mix of everything. I feel like with The Dance and Live from Boston specifically, you get all of their albums.
Yeah.
In one. You get a whole like spectrum of where they've grown, where they've been in the last 20 years. So I would say that like maybe it is the live albums. Also because, so for me, Rhiannon is one of my favorite songs of all time. The harmonies, the song, I don't necessarily know what Rhiannon's officially about, or at least when I first heard it. Now I do. But when I first heard it, I'm like, I don't know what this is about, but I feel it in my soul so hard. And I love singing that song with the band. Like, I'm obsessed with that song. And in their live album, their 1980 London, England version, she sings different words, and I think she does it in later live versions too. But there's the all your life you've never seen a woman taken by the sky, would you even try? She changed that a little bit, but my favorite one is once in a million years a lady like her rises, Rhiannon you cry, but she's gone, your life knows no answer. And I'm just like, damn.
Yeah.
And so then I was like, I gotta know what this song is about.
Yeah.
And I started doing a deep dive about what Rhiannon's about. It's about an old Welsh witch, but it turns out that it was actually a Welsh goddess. And then as like time went by, they turned her into a witch, which patriarchy at its finest.
Of course.
Which now witch isn't a bad word, but back then.
Yeah, exactly.
But she started getting really into this. Mick Fleetwood said that her Rhiannon in those days was like an exorcism on stage.
Yeah.
And I look at it more as a prayer, the way that she just feels it and dances with it. And I wouldn't call it an exorcism. I'd call it a prayer. But she becomes so obsessed with this Welsh goddess, witch, whatever. And a fan actually sent her 4 paperback novels about Rhiannon.
Jeez.
And she read them and she loved the Evangeline Walton's adaptation of it. And so she bought the rights and she started working on a Rhiannon project. Nobody knew what it was going to be at the time.
Yeah.
All these years later, just in 2020, she said that there are about 10 songs done and they're working on a TV miniseries of it.
Oh, that's so good.
I'm so excited.
If there was any way I could be a part of it, even if I was like working craft services.
Yeah.
Oh, that was so cool.
Now that I've taken more of a dive, and this all started just because she sang different lyrics on the live album.
Yeah.
And so for sure the live album, also just the magic of live music is great. And so the live albums, and particularly Rhiannon and the live albums, and Silver Springs. Silver Springs is one of my favorite songs too, but I'm not going to. We've talked a lot about Silver Springs and why we love it. But Silver Springs and Rhiannon are probably my 2 favorites. And a big reason for those is the live performances.
Yeah.
Like, they're not just magical on album. Like, watching them live, watching how they change, watching Stevie stare into his eyes and tell him everything she ever wanted to say, make it even more magical.
Yeah.
What is your favorite? Would you say your favorite song is other than Silver Springs?
Oh, other than Silver Springs. That's another one that changes all the time, but just because of exactly where I currently am in my life. And the way that it hit me even a week ago, just listening to their discography all over again. Landslide is just, I mean, it's a lot of people's favorite for a reason. I could sit there and be like, oh, well, let me pick something that's obscure so people actually think I listen to Fleetwood Mac. But
no, don't.
There's something about it. That opening line of the chorus I've heard a million times, but just really taking in that I've been afraid of changing because I built my life around you, and looking at like my own personal relationship and just feeling all those feelings and exactly where I currently am. I love Stevie Nicks so much because I just feel like everything that I've ever felt, she just has a song for it. And it's so interesting. And I listen to it. It's only a recent thing, but I can't listen to it anymore without crying. I can't think about it without crying. And so I would say right now, currently, it is Landslide. We've all, especially us younger people, the world was promised to us one very specific way by our parents and our grandparents, and it's just not turning out to be that way anymore. The likelihood of us being able to own homes, to be able to get good paying jobs after we go to college because we were told we were supposed to, and all these different things, to where our expectations of what life was going to be like are just not being met. And I think that's what's so interesting about Landslide, is that's really what it's about, is like, for her in that moment of her life of thinking, I'm 27 years old. I've been so certain that I was going to make it. I've been so certain that this music thing was going to work out, but here I am, and I am a waitress, and we barely have enough money to eat food and put gas in our car, and I'm working my ass off to afford this place to stay, and the one car that we share, and Lindsay's off playing guitar for this band and that band, and he gets to stay at home, and I just have to go to work, and I'm tired, and I thought that my life would turn out differently. And I think maybe because like I'm in my late 20s now, I'm in the same place where I'm like, what the fuck happened?
I'm just gonna finish out the course, because even but time makes you bolder and children get older, and I'm getting older too. Like, getting older is so hard.
Dude, every single year on my birthday. And you know what? Hey, I'm a Capricorn. Sue me. But I cry every year on my birthday. Every year. And like this year in particular, because I just had my birthday. I don't have not to get all personal on the pod, but I don't have a relationship with my mother. And she texted me on my birthday, just happy birthday. That was it. So we don't have any messages between each other. And so it was just this one message instead of like, oh, even though I deleted the messages years ago, there's not like all this history of the last time we had a conversation. It's just happy birthday. That's it. Thinking about my life in that way too, like, man, children get older. Like I obviously you're the first person I ever had a relationship with and now I don't even know who you are. Like,
yeah,
I don't know anything about you. You're a complete stranger to me. And same thing, she could say the same thing about me. It's just the weight of life itself. And that meant something so important to her at 27. And I know to this day, you know, in her 70s, can sit there and play that song. It means something completely different.
yeah.
And I know as I get older, it'll grow and evolve and change. But like, God, getting older sucks.
And that's why it hits so hard still to so many people.
Yeah.
Because it can change and flow. And we've talked about this already. The magic of her songs just can fit so many different situations.
Yeah.
But the fact of being in the type of situation where she was writing it is also really powerful.
And you know what? Time passes and children get older, and I'm getting older too.
Yes.
And we're all going to get older, and it's just going to keep happening. I wish people looked at age the way that, like, I know older people end up actually aging, which is like, what a privilege it is to age. What a privilege it is to get older, because there are people that die right now.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's somebody that just died this second, you know? And so they don't get to age anymore. It's just so hard.
And you do hit that point, but you know, going back to her song, it definitely does. You have that feeling sometimes of like, this is not what I was promised. This is not what I was expecting. So I get it. I cry too.
Yeah. I think, you know, I used to sit there and I didn't want to ever say, like, when people would ask me, like, oh, you're such a big Fleetwood Mac fan, like, what's your favorite song? And I'd, like, name some song that they didn't know probably. And now to this day, I'm like, no, the reason why Silver Springs specifically, Dreams, and Landslide are their biggest stream songs of all time is because
they're amazing.
Because they're amazing. They mean something, whether I'm 17 or 27 or 37 or 87. It'll just always
mean something.
Yeah.
And that leads me to my next question. What has, like, Stevie and Christine brought to your life as far as a musician, as far as just in your life in general, as a woman, as... I know that's a great question.
Yeah. I think I'll start with Christine. Definitely. She has an optimism about love and this, like, funness about love and being in love, and she makes me excited to want to be in love. I think, like, a great example of that is You Make Love and Fun off of Rumors. What a great, like, reprieve from the tumultuousness of that album as a whole. But, like, Everywhere, Little Lies is also such a fun song. I think I've talked about this before. You know, the 80s were perfectly tailored to, like, Christine's writing. The first time I heard it Everywhere, I was like, God, I want to love somebody like that. And so looking for that sort of optimism and love is something that Christine gave me. And I think that that's just so wonderful. And Stevie, on the other hand, I mean, I could go on forever about what she's given me, but she is just a trailblazer, and she's unafraid of being herself. And she had this, like, beauty that, like, this natural beauty that I could just, oh my God. Well, I want to, I don't know, I guess, like, I've always tried to, like, emulate that in some way. Like, how can I, when you look at certain pieces of clothing, your brain goes, oh, that's Stevie Nicks, lace, leather, or like fingerless gloves, a top hat, sometimes a tambourine, like flowy clothing. Like, I could dress one way and I'm not even trying to, and someone would be like, oh, you dress like Stevie Nicks. Like, she has such a style, and everyone understands it, whether or not they understand fashion at all. And I would love to be able to, like inspired me to find my own uniqueness and what's interesting to me and, like, what I prioritize. And I think that, like, finding that singularity as a songwriter and as a person, like, is so cool. So I would love to be able to, like, I think I've taken that from her, and at the same time, like, I just idolize her, you know? I have her Barbie, dude. Oh my God. I haven't bought a Barbie since ever, my whole life, but I bought a Barbie, like, a couple months ago.
As soon as it went on sale.
Literally the second it went on sale, I went, purchase, thanks.
Mine.
Mm-hmm.
I think too, like, you were talking about Christine and loving someone that way, and she's just, like, also this, she teaches me not to be afraid of being feminine. Mm-hmm. Like, she has this softness and this femininity that's totally okay and beautiful. Not just okay, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you're in this world and you're, like, trying to find your way as, I want to be a strong woman, I can't show any of that. No, you can be both. You can have that femininity, that softness, and still be a strong woman.
Yeah. I mean, one of the cool things that Stevie, in an interview I saw recently, she called Christine and her energy like Earth Mother. And I was like, that's it. There you go.
With her, I feel like that's the biggest takeaway from her. And then with Stevie, it's probably her songwriting and her honest songwriting. And then just the freedom she has. Like the absolute freedom of just people all her career have called her a witchy woman. And she took that as a good thing and turned it into a good thing, to something that like we as women now are just like, yes, go off. Like,
reclaimed witch.
I want to be that. And I do. I want to, that freedom that she gives to everything that she does.
Yeah.
And is just so, whether she really is or not, seems so comfortable in herself.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of energy I want going into this year.
Same. Yes. I think we need to, you know, be more ourselves, but be more assertive and love hard and love freely. And that's, I know not the thing that most people take away from listening to Fleetwood Mac music, but like, hey, learn from their mistakes.
Well, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Before we leave, I did give you the honor of choosing our next female artist that we're going to be discussing. So who is that going to be?
That's going to be Miss Carole King.
Yes. That is going to be so much fun. There is such a large discography to go through for that.
Oh my gosh, about like 120 number one hit songs. So
yeah,
that'll be fun.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
But so make sure to join us next month, where we'll be discussing Carole King and her history and her impact on the music industry, which is very clearly a very big one. Before we leave, shout yourself out, your socials, your...
Ooh, well, I'm Casey Yeager, and I'm in a band called Rider Waite, like the tarot deck, except for we spell Rider with a Y. So on all social media, we are at Rider Waite, and we have some new music coming out this year that we're really excited about. Yes. And if you like witchy music, that's what we do. Hey.
Awesome. Well, you can catch me at I Am Amy or at Amy Colleen Music on all social media. And make sure to follow this on whatever streaming platform you're listening to catch us next month to talk about more amazing, wonderful women.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time. Bye.